Dear listener. Night, you and I embark on a journey through the flickering shadows of history, into the deep winters and darker traditions of a people who knew the long night better than most. The Vikings, those wild men and women of the north, warriors, farmers, seafarers, and, as we shall see, deeply strange sleepers. Let us slip through the snow and into the glowing warmth of a Viking longhouse. Here, under the heavy thatch of sod and timber, life slows, the fire glows, and strange dreams are about. Imagine living in a world where the sun barely skims the horizon for weeks at a time. This was life in Scandinavia. Long, cold nights, days so dim they felt like perpetual dusk. In the heart of winter, the darkness could stretch nearly Arthur's hours each day. The Vikings were no strangers to the night. In many ways, they lived within it. In this world, the concept of sleep wasn't shaped by modern clocks or artificial lights. There were no alarm bells or glowing phone screens. Instead, the natural rhythm of darkness guided their rest. It is believed that the Vikings, like many pre-industrial peoples, followed a pattern known as segmented sleep. They didn't sleep in one long stretch like we do today. Rather, they slept in two phases, falling asleep shortly after dusk, waking for a while in the deep night, and then drifting off. That wakeful midnight moment was not seen as insomnia. It was a sacred hour. In the center of the longhouse, a fire always burned. It had to. Without it, frost would creep across the floorboards, livestock would shiver, and breath would turn to ice. Someone was always assigned to watch the hearth. Often, this was the quietest time of all, when people stirred from their first sleep. Some would use the hour to pray to Thor or Freyja, the gods of strength and love. Others would mend tools or whisper softly to a spouse. Still others would simply lie there, dreaming half awake, letting thoughts drift like smoke toward the rafters. The Norse believed this middle hour was a time when the boundary between the worlds thinned. Spirits could walk, ancestors might whisper, and the gods could hear your dreams. Let's look around the longhouse now. The air is thick with smoke. There's no chimney, only a hole in the roof. Wooden beams stretch across the ceiling, blackened by years of soot. Along the walls, low wooden platforms act as beds, piled with straw and furs. Entire families, grandparents, children, even guests, often shared sleeping quarters. There was little privacy, and even less silence. Babies cried, dogs barked, the wind howled outside, and yet there was comfort in the closeness. The Vikings believed in the power of warmth and kinship. They knew that in the cold you needed the body heat of others to survive. So people slept together, skin to skin. Not out of shamelessness but practicality. You might hear a soft lowing sound just beyond the curtain. That's because in winter, animals were often brought inside. Chickens, goats, and even cattle shared the longhouse. Their warmth helped fight off the bitter chill. Some longhouses had separate stalls, but many simply had a barrier of wooden slats. The smell, the noise, and the occasional nighttime accident were just part of Viking life. It may seem strange to us today, but for the Vikings, the nighttime sounds of cows shifting or hens clucking were familiar and oddly reassuring. They meant life. They meant survival. Before bed, many Vikings followed small rituals: a prayer, a drink of mead, a final poke at the fire with a stick. Some carved small charms into the wood of their bed frames. Protective runes like algiz, the symbol of protection, or awaz, the rune of transformation and death. These symbols weren't just decorative, they were talismans, warding off evil dreams, spirits, and omens. It wasn't uncommon for people to sleep with small pouches of herbs, juniper, pine needles, or yarrow, believed to guard against nightmares. Others placed iron knives beneath their pillows to keep away the dreaded mare, a spirit said to sit on your chest and steal your breath. Yes, the Vikings feared bad dreams, but they also believed dreams had meaning. To the Norse mind, dreams weren't random. They were messages, visions from gods, warnings from ancestors, whispers of fate. A dream of a wolf could signal betrayal. A raven might mean Odin was watching. Fire in dreams meant change, good or bad. Dreams of drowning were taken as spiritual signs, while flying dreams meant your spirit had left your body. People often shared their dreams aloud. The next morning, the village Velva, a female seer or shaman, might be asked to interpret strange symbols. Her words were not taken lightly. She could bless or curse with her voice alone. In Viking sagas, sleep is never portrayed as weakness. In fact, sleep could be a strength. Great warriors took long naps before battle to summon visions. Kings were said to dream of their deaths and their glory. Even Odin, the Allfather himself, was said to travel the dream world in search of knowledge. The idea that sleep was a gateway, not an escape, was deeply rooted in Norse belief. Sleeping wasn't just about rest. It was about power, prophecy, and preparation. Mead, the Viking drink of choice, played a role in many bedtime routines. It was fermented from honey, often spiced with herbs and sometimes extremely strong. A cup of mead before bed helped warm the body and slow the mind, but sometimes it did more than that. Vikings told tales of dreams after mead, strange visions, prophetic symbols, even encounters with the gods. Some believed mead could open the spirit to other realms. Others simply liked the warmth in their belly and the quiet sleep that followed. Not all nights were peaceful. During long winters, wolves prowled near the edge of villages. Spirits were said to rise from grave mounds. The Norse believed the dead could walk, especially those improperly buried. To guard the home, iron tools were placed near the doorway. Dogs were kept inside. Sometimes, someone would stay awake through the darkest part of the night, eyes scanning the shadows, whispering the names of the gods for protection. Sleep was precious, but never taken for granted. As we end this chapter of the night, let us remember, the Viking sleep was strange, but deeply human. It was shaped by nature, wrapped in myth, and watched over by gods. It carried fears, dreams, warmth, and wisdom. It was not a solitary act, but a shared one, not just a pause from life, but a space where life and death whispered to each other in the dark. And maybe, just maybe, there is still something of that ancient night inside us, a part of us that yearns for the firelight, for silence, for sacred dreams. So sleep now, as the Vikings once did, with the wind outside, the warmth of others close, and the dreams of gods hovering just beyond the veil. In the dead of night, when the fire is low and shadows flicker on the thatched walls, something stirs in the Viking world. You cannot see it, but you can feel it, a presence cold and weightless. You wake, breathless, unable to move, a pressure on your chest, heavy as stone, yet nothing is there. They called it Mara, the nightmare spirit. Tonight, we drift not into comfort, but into a world where sleep was haunted, where unseen beings walked the nighttime halls, and where dreams were battles between the soul and the shadows. Welcome to Chapter 2 of our Viking bedtime journey, the mare and the night spirits. The Norse were among the first to give a name to a sensation we now recognize across cultures: sleep paralysis. to them, it was not a trick of the mind, but a creature of the dark. The mare was a malicious spirit, sometimes the soul of a witch, sometimes a demon, sometimes a cursed person, whose spirit wandered in sleep. She would enter your home through the tiniest of cracks, a knothole in the wall, a loose shutter, and settle on your chest as you slept. You'd awaken frozen, heart pounding, gasping for breath. The mare didn't simply scare you. She rode you like a horse, crushing your lungs and stealing your soul's energy. To the Vikings, this wasn't superstition. It was survival knowledge, and it happened often enough that entire sagas, like the Icelandic Grettis saga, mention the mare tormenting both warriors and wise men alike. But the Vikings were not helpless in the face of night spirits. They prepared. Doors were carved with runes of warding. Iron nails were hammered into the lintels. A knife might be tucked beneath a pillow, not to be used, but to act as a magical barrier. Iron was thought to burn spirits who touched it. A ring of ashes might be laid around the sleeping child. If it was disturbed in the morning, the family knew something had walked through it. Women wore amulets of Mjolnir, Thor's hammer, around their necks as they slept. Children were taught lullabies that doubled as charms, soft songs that called to Freyja, goddess of love and war, for protection through the night. And of course they told stories, because naming the darkness, they believed, gave you power over it. You see, to the Norse, sleep was not simply a time of rest. It was a time of travel. They believed the soul could leave the body in dreams, floating into the realm of the gods, walking through Asgard or Niflheim, or meeting spirits both kind and cruel. But if your soul wandered too far, it might not return, or worse, it might come back changed. A person who woke after a strange dream, speaking in tongues or acting out of character, was watched closely. Perhaps they had seen too much, or perhaps something had come back with them. This is why dreams were taken seriously. A family might spend the morning decoding a single night's vision. A Velva might be summoned to explain a recurring nightmare. To dream was to walk between worlds. Some mares, it was said, were not spirits at all, but people. Women, especially, were suspected of shape-shifting in their sleep. The term night rider was used for witches who rode out as spirits, tormenting enemies, spying, or seeking vengeance. Accusations could be deadly. A woman who lived alone, who muttered to herself, or who was blamed for a neighbor's nightmare, could be labeled a Mara. Some were forced to sleep with iron chains. Others were exiled. Even horses were not safe. If a mare was found drenched in sweat and trembling at dawn, it was believed a Mara had ridden it all night. Night was a dangerous landscape, even for the innocent. Some Viking homes were said to be haunted, not by the dead, but by restless spirits of the dark. They weren't ghosts in the modern sense. They were draugr, corpse spirits risen from the earth. While the dead were usually buried in barrows, mounds of earth covered with stones, some were restless. A greedy man, a murderer, or someone cursed could rise as a draugr and walk the halls at night, tormenting the living. If strange thuds echoed in the rafters, or livestock were found dead in the morning, suspicion would fall on. To combat this, some households conducted night-binding rituals, chanting runes, burning herbs, or even sealing the dead with spells. A sword might be laid across a grave to hold the body down. In extreme cases, the head was removed and buried separately from the body. Sleep was not only sacred, it was shielded. Of course, not all spirits were evil. The Norse believed that many gods walked the night. Odin, cloaked and one-eyed, often wandered the darkness, seeking wisdom. He might appear in a dream to offer a cryptic vision, or a warning. Freyja watched over women, especially expectant mothers, guarding their dreams from harm. Her presence brought warm sleep, rich dreams of beauty, love, and strength. And then there were the Dizzer, female ancestral spirits who watched over families. They were guardians of fate, sometimes appearing in dreams before major life events, a birth, a war, or a death. If a Dizzer appeared in your sleep, it was time to listen carefully. Let me tell you a tale. Once, in the sagas, there was a man named Thorbjorn who was plagued by a mare each night. He would wake choking, sweating, certain he was dying. His family watched him fade, until one night he fell asleep with a sea axe, a small Viking blade, gripped in his hand. That night he dreamed of a woman cloaked in shadow who tried to press upon his chest. But in the dream he struck her. He awoke to find a distant cousin wounded and cursing him. She had been traveling in spirit, tormenting him over an old grudge. From that night on, she never appeared again, and Thorbjorn slept soundly. In Viking belief, sleep wasn't safe by default. You had to earn it, protect it, defend it, even in your dreams. A restless night might mean you had wronged someone. A peaceful one meant your house was balanced, your ancestors appeased, and your luck intact. Even children learned to guard their sleep with charms and chants. The night was not something to drift into carelessly. It was sacred ground, thin as ice over deep water, and in that understanding, perhaps we find something valuable, a sense of respect, of mystery, of the idea that rest is not a weakness, but a space of hidden strength. As we draw this chapter to a close, listen. Do you hear the wind against the timber walls? The slow, steady breath of fire? The beat of your own heart? The Vikings believed that each of those things, wind, flame, pulse, had a spirit, that to sleep was to surrender to those forces, to trust in the balance of light and dark, warmth and cold, seen and unseen. The mare may have haunted their nights, but so too did gods watch over them. Ancestors whispered, spirits lingered, and through it all, the fire glowed. Sleep, in their world, was not an escape from life. It was part of the myth itself. So rest now, with iron near your pillow. Let your dreams roam safely beyond the veil. And if you meet someone in the shadows, smile, and remember, the Vikings walked there too. Kip's soft breath, silence, then the gentle crackle of fire. Come in quietly. Close the wooden door behind you. The night is bitter cold outside, but here, within these ancient walls, is warmth, breath, and life. The fire glows in the center, low and smoldering. Shapes move in the shadows. Men, women, children, dogs, all resting under fur and wool, nestled together like embers in a living hearth. This is the Viking longhouse, a place where dreams and bodies mingled freely, where sleep was a communal act, noisy and sacred, where privacy was a foreign word, and slumber unfolded not in silence, but in a symphony of breath, warmth, and the crackle of old timber. Tonight, we explore a strange idea to modern ears. What it meant to sleep in the Viking longhouse, surrounded not just by family, but by livestock, ancestors, fire, and gods. The longhouse, longhus in Old Norse, was the core of Viking life, typically built of timber and turf, with thick walls and a low, sloping roof. The longhouse stretched long and narrow across the Scandinavian landscape, like a grounded ship. Some were modest, others grand, but all shared a vital centerpiece, the central hearth. This hearth was no simple fireplace. It was the soul of the home, both practical and symbolic. The fire provided heat, cooked food, offered light, and warded off evil, and perhaps most importantly, it burned all night. Because in a Viking winter, fire was not luxury, it was survival. There were no bedrooms in a Viking longhouse, no closed doors, no hallways, just the long rectangular space divided by low wooden partitions or woven curtains at best. Along each side of the walls ran raised platforms made of wood and covered in straw, rushes, and animal hides. These served as benches by day and beds by night. There were no mattresses, no linen sheets. A bed was as soft as your harvest and as warm as the animals you shared it with. Families slept side by side, parents, children, servants, and even guests. There were no assigned beds. If someone was visiting, they simply curled up beside you. It was understood. There was comfort in this closeness, physical warmth, emotional safety, and a shared sense that sleep wasn't private. It was tribal. And then there were the animals. During the coldest months, livestock were brought inside. Cows, pigs, sheep, goats, even chickens. Why? Because their body heat helped warm the house, and in return, they stayed alive through the brutal cold. Sometimes these animals were housed in their own stalls near the far end of the longhouse, separated by wooden slats, but often there were no real boundaries. The snort of a pig, the low breath of a cow, the cluck of a rooster, these were sounds of home. Imagine falling asleep to that symphony. A baby gurgles, a sheep shuffles, a man snores, a dog turns in its sleep and curls against a child's feet. It might sound chaotic, but to the Vikings it was peace. The hearth fire burned at the center of the room, always, but with no chimney. The smoke rose and lingered inside, escaping through a hole in the roof, or slowly filtering through thatch. This meant the upper part of the longhouse was smoky, thick and harsh, but down below, at sleeping level, the air was clearer and warmer. Still, smoke coated everything: the rafters, the wool cloaks, the straw bedding. Your dreams, too, became saturated in its scent. The fire was never allowed to die. A family member, usually the eldest or youngest, was assigned to tend it through the night. It was not just for warmth. It was for protection. The flame kept wild beasts away, lit the path for ancestral spirits, and marked your home as living. To sleep by the hearth was to sleep near the gods. Let's take a slow walk down the longhouse now. There in the corner, a mother and infant rest beneath a shared cloak, the child swaddled in lambskin. Next to them, a grandfather with a carved cane snores softly. A pair of young siblings sleep head to toe, giggling until moments before they drifted off. A dog stirs, rises, turns in a circle, and lies back down. Not far away, a thrall, an enslaved servant, sleeps alone on a rough mat. He is given no furs. His breath fogs in the cold corner. Life in the longhouse was not equal. Social status shaped where and how you slept. The wealthier you were, the better the furs, the thicker the wall partition, the closer your place to the hearth. And yet, everyone shared the same air, the same flame, the same long night. Before sleep, a Viking household slowed into ritual. Wool was spun, tools were checked, mead was passed around. Children were lulled with lullabies that warned of trolls and sea monsters and fire spirits, songs of danger that brought comfort. A quiet murmur filled the house. Some families prayed to Freyr, god of fertility and peace, to bring quiet dreams. Others whispered thanks to Frigg, goddess of hearth and motherhood. The smoke curled, the livestock settled, and slowly the longhouse softened into silence, punctuated only by the occasional grunt, cough, or low song from a dreamer. In the Viking Age, night was for storytelling. Fathers and mothers recited sagas, heroic tales of gods and monsters. These were not just entertainment. They were education. Children learned about bravery, loyalty, fate, and death through tales passed down like sacred heirlooms. It was common to fall asleep to a voice in the dark weaving words like thread. These stories sank deep into the dreams of the listeners, blending with their sleep, shaping their visions. Even in slumber the sagas continued. Despite all precautions, winters could be merciless. Sometimes the fire burned too low, a snowstorm blew through a loose doorframe, or a sick child coughed through the night. Cold claimed live silently, frostbite, pneumonia, or starvation. And so, sleeping together wasn't just tradition, it was a lifeline. Parents held children close, not just to comfort them, but to keep their heartbeats steady. A body alone could perish, but together the clan endured. The longhouse was a womb, dark, warm, crowded. Life huddled together to survive. It's strange to imagine now, dreaming with a dozen others at your side, the line between personal and shared experience blurred. A dream whispered aloud in the morning became part of the household myth. Someone might wake crying out Odin's name, another would sleepwalk to the fire. Children would murmur about ravens and trees of gold. Dreams were rarely private, and often prophetic. The longhouse was not just a building. It was a vessel of dreamers, a ship of sleep floating on the icy seas of night. To sleep in the longhouse was to be part of a chain. Your grandmother once slept on this same bench. Your father once stirred the fire. The same creaking beam overhead had heard generations breathe and snore and weep. Sleep was not disconnected. It was historical, sacred, part of the rhythm of the clan. And in that shared rhythm there was peace, not because it was quiet, but because it was known. Now, as we step back from the hearth and look one last time, the scene glows with soft life. Bodies tucked in furs, eyes closed, dreams flickering behind them like shadow puppets. Outside, snow falls silently. Inside, the fire warms the bones of beasts and men alike, and in that warmth, the Vikings sleep. Not alone, never alone, they sleep together, bound by blood and story, by fear and firelight, by memory and myth. And as you sleep tonight, know that once, long ago, a people slept this way, under stars and smoke, side by side, dreaming sagas in the silence. In the dead of night, when the fire is low and shadows flicker on the thatched walls, something stirs in the Viking world. You cannot see it, but you can feel it, a presence cold and weightless. You wake, breathless, unable to move, a pressure on your chest, heavy as stone, yet nothing is there. They called it Mara, the nightmare spirit. Tonight, we drift not into comfort, but into a world where sleep was haunted, where unseen beings walked the nighttime halls, and where dreams were battles between the soul and the shadows. Welcome to Chapter 2 of our Viking bedtime journey, the mare and the night spirits. The Norse were among the first to give a name to a sensation we now recognize across cultures: sleep paralysis. To them, it was not a trick of the mind, but a creature of the dark. The mare was a malicious spirit, sometimes the soul of a witch, sometimes a demon, sometimes a cursed person, whose spirit wandered in sleep. She would enter your home through the tiniest of cracks, a knothole in the wall, a loose shutter, and settle on your chest as you slept. You'd awaken frozen, heart pounding, gasping for breath. The mare didn't simply scare you. She rode you like a horse, crushing your lungs and stealing your soul's energy. To the Vikings, this wasn't superstition. It was survival knowledge. And it happened often enough that entire sagas, like the Icelandic Grettis saga, mention the mare tormenting both warriors and wise men alike. But the Vikings were not helpless in the face of night spirits. They prepared. Doors were carved with runes of warding. Iron nails were hammered into the lintels. A knife might be tucked beneath a pillow, not to be used, but to act as a magical barrier. Iron was thought to burn spirits who touched it. A ring of ashes might be laid around the sleeping child. If it was disturbed in the morning, the family knew something had walked through it. Women wore amulets of Mjolnir, Thor's hammer, around their necks as they slept. Children were taught lullabies that doubled as charms, soft songs that called to Freyja, goddess of love and war, for protection through the night. And of course they told stories, because naming the darkness, they believed, gave you power over it. You see, to the Norse, sleep was not simply a time of rest. It was a time of travel. Sleep didn't just come before the battle, it came between it. Sieges could last days. Skirmishes paused for nightfall. Even during a raid, warriors might find time to collapse beside a tree, to nap in the lull between combat. These moments of rest were fragile. A warrior slept with one eye open, often gripping a blade. Companions kept watch in shifts. It is said that in these naps, dreams were stranger, louder, more vivid. Some believed that when you slept so close to death, your soul hovered, and the world beyond whispered more clearly. To die in sleep was not always shameful. It depended on the dream. If a warrior died peacefully, but with a vision of Odin or Valkyries, it was believed his soul had been chosen, called before the gods without need for bloodshed. Some leaders requested to be left alone before death, to sleep beside a fire, holding their weapons, wrapped in bearskin. If they passed in that sleep, it was considered a death of honor, not weakness. To fall asleep with courage and awaken in Valhalla, that was its own kind of glory. Viking warriors valued rest because they valued readiness. A man who slept well fought well. He struck faster, held his shield steadier, saw the enemy's eyes before the blade. In the sagas, those who ignored sleep, who bragged of never resting, often met foolish ends. Arrogance clouded the senses, fatigue cost lives, so they trained to sleep fast, deep, and dream sharp. Even as they traveled, they learned to nap on boats, under rain, through storm. Every resting hour was a chance to recharge not just body, but soul. What does a Viking warrior dream of? Of swords? Yes. Of fire? Often, but also of home. Many dreamed of longhouses, of family, of harvests, of the smell of salt and smoke, of children laughing, of meals yet to be eaten. These dreams gave them strength. A good dream could lift morale, could mean victory, could mean a warrior would fight not just to win, but to return. And some never told their dreams aloud, keeping them folded close, like a hidden charm against death. Now, come with me to the edge of a battlefield. The stars are dim, the sky is low. And there, by the fire's dying glow, lie warriors in rest. They do not tremble, they do not cry, they sleep with swords at their sides, with dreams of gods, with memories of mothers and mead halls. They sleep because it is their right, because tomorrow they may not have the chance, and if they wake they will rise like thunder, and if they don't they will not wake at all. Sleep now, as they once did, not as an escape, but as a readiness. Let your breath settle like fog. Let your dreams speak. And if Odin appears, greet him kindly. He may have something to tell you. Come closer now. The longhouse is still. The fire burns low. Children sleep beneath woolen cloaks, their small bodies curled like roots beneath a great tree. Their cheeks are red with warmth, their fingers tucked beneath fur, but not all is calm. Tonight, we explore the childhood side of Viking sleep, a world of lullabies sung not of bunnies and rainbows, but of trolls, wolves, and runic protection. A world where dreams were believed to shape fate, and where night was a time of fear, hope, and whispered prayers to the gods. Let us begin with the smallest sleeper in the longhouse, the baby. Viking infants were often laid in cradles carved from wood, simple, heavy, and low to the ground. These cradles were sometimes etched with runes for protection. One common symbol was algiz, the rune for shielding and defense. Inside the cradle was a bed of straw or wool, layered with animal furs. A mother's woven cloak might wrap around the child. A stone warmed by the fire might be placed beneath for warmth. Children were rarely left to sleep alone. The firelight, the hum of conversation, and the warmth of the household soothed them into sleep. Babies were rocked to the rhythm of the longhouse's breath. But even these tender moments came wrapped in caution. To the Viking mind, children were especially vulnerable in sleep, not just to the cold, but to spirits. The night was seen as thin-skinned, a liminal time, when the barriers between this world and the next loosened. Just as grown men guarded their dreams with charms and weapons, so too did mothers guard their children. A knife, small but sharp, might be hung above the cradle to ward off evil. A strip of iron could be laid underneath. Herbal satchels containing juniper, yarrow, or mugwort were tied to the cradle's edge. These herbs were believed to repel the Mara, the same nightmare spirit feared by adults. Above all, there were the songs, lullabies passed down from mother to daughter like woven patterns in cloth. You might expect Viking lullabies to be sweet, but they were not always so. Instead of lullabies promising safe dreams, Viking songs often warned children of what lurked in the shadows. Take this imagined lullaby, based on fragments of Norse folklore medial. Sleep now, child, close your eyes. The troll is near, the fire dies. If you stir and cry or moan, the wind will call your name alone. These songs sound grim to us, but to Viking children, they were tools. They taught caution, instilled vigilance. They reminded the child that the world beyond the walls was wild. The lullaby, paradoxically, created calm through fear. Among the many creatures of Norse legend, trolls and Huldu folk, the hidden people, were feared most at night. Trolls were brutish beings who lived in forests and mountains. They hated sunlight and were said to steal children who wandered too far. Huldu folk were more mysterious, beautiful, shadowy figures who could bless or curse. Children were taught to never speak aloud their dreams in the dark. Doing so might attract unwanted attention. It was said that trolls listened at windows, and that elves could enter a child's room through a gap in the roof beam. To prevent this, families sealed holes with rags soaked in salt water and recited protective verses before sleep. The Viking mother was not only a nurturer, she was a spiritual protector. She knew the herbs that calmed restlessness. She knew the chants to keep the night spirits at bay. If a child woke crying, she would lay a hand over their chest and whisper a protection prayer. Bernal, be still, little heart, be brave in the night. Oh, Freyja will hold you, Thor bring you light. She might sing softly while rocking, her own fingers spinning wool or shaping dough. Her voice became the thread between the dream world and the waking one. In this way, sleep became an act of motherhood, both gentle and fierce. Children didn't have stuffed animals or plastic dolls, but they had charms and carvings. A favorite toy might be a small wooden horse or a carved wolf. Some were worn on necklaces, others held in tiny hands during sleep. these weren't just for comfort. Each carried meaning. A carved horse could represent Sleipnir, Odin's eight-legged steed, might symbolize courage. A tiny hammer charm, like Mjolnir, might hang from a child's neck to invoke protection. Every object held story and purpose, woven into sleep like lullabies of wood and bone. If a child dreamed of falling, it meant something would be lost. If they dreamed of fire, it meant change was near. If they dreamed of birds, it meant travel or transformation. Parents listened carefully to their child's dreams. Each morning, some dreams were brushed aside, others taken to a vulva for interpretation. A dream with a wolf in the sky or a tree of blood could mean something grave. A dream of a golden ship could mean a gift was coming. Even small children were watched for signs. They were not empty vessels. Their dreams could shape the household's fate. Dogs were among a child's most trusted companions. They slept curled near the cradles, providing warmth and warning. It was believed that dogs could sense spirits and would growl or bark if the Mara or Huldufoelk came near. If a dog growled in the night, a parent might rise and recite a warding verse, place more iron near the doorway, or relight the fire. The bond between children and dogs was deep, spiritual. Some sagas describe dogs following their young masters into death, even appearing in dreams afterward as guides. As children grew older, their place in the longhouse shifted. Babies slept beside their mothers, but toddlers and older children were moved to sleep among siblings or near grandparents. Shift was symbolic. It meant the child was learning to navigate sleep alone, to face the darkness, the stories, the dreams, without constant protection. It was a rite of passage. To sleep unafraid was to grow brave. And bravery was everything in the Viking world. Children learned not to fear the dark, but to respect it, to know its boundaries, to carry charms and memories like armor. One of the most feared and cherished nights in a Viking child's life was the first night spent away from home. Perhaps in a neighbor's hall, or in the woods on a rite of passage journey. They took with them a protective charm, sometimes a blade too small to fight with, but sharp enough to symbolize readiness. They were told stories of bravery. They were given sacred verses to repeat in case of fear. If they returned strong, they were praised. If they returned with a dream worth remembering, it was added to the family's saga. And so even in sleep, a child could become a legend. Now the longhouse quiet seats again. A mother hums one last verse. A dog sighs near the fire. A child stirs but does not wake, and the darkness wraps them gently. Not in fear, but in story, in meaning. For in the Viking world, sleep was not an empty silence. It was filled with purpose, with symbols, with echoes of gods and spirits, and ancient truths. The child's dream was not a flicker. It was a spark. And so, as you drift to your own dreams tonight, remember, Radda sleep, even for the smallest among us, was once a place of mystery, magic, and might, and still may be. Sleep in the Viking world was more than rest. It was a ritual, a cycle, a sacred silence that reached beyond the warmth of the hearth and into the cold halls of death. To the Norse mind, there was no firm line between sleep and death. They were seen as siblings, one fleeting, one final. Just as the body slipped into dream, so too, at life's end, it would slip into the great dream, a sleep from which one would not awaken. Tonight, we walk slowly through the rituals of Viking death. We speak of deathbeds, burial dreams, sleeping with the ancestors, and what it meant to surrender not to the night, but to eternity. The Vikings referred to death using words that mirrored the language of sleep: to lie down with the ancestors, to rest beneath the mound, to be called into silence. They saw death not as an ending, but a transition. The soul moved from one form of existence to another, sometimes to Valhalla, the hall of warriors, sometimes to Folkvanger, the meadow of the goddess Freyja, and for others to Hel, a neutral realm, not hellish but shadowed and cold. In each case, the body was prepared for its last sleep, and the people who loved them kept vigil. When a Viking lay dying, their bed became sacred. It was common to move the dying person closer to the hearth. Furs were piled thick, and their most cherished possessions were placed beside them: a blade, a brooch, a bowl of water. Family gathered close. They whispered final prayers. Some sang lullabies, not the lullabies of children, but soft songs meant to soothe the soul's passage. If the person was a warrior, comrades might speak sagas of their victories. If they were a mother or elder, their wisdom was remembered. This moment, this deathbed, was both public and sacred. It bound the living to the dead, and the future to the past. There are tales of Vikings dreaming their own deaths before they came. Some saw ships on fire sailing into the mist. Others dreamed of bridges made of gold, wolves at their heels, or of ravens lifting them skyward. These dreams were not feared. They were accepted as messages, signs that the soul was being called. And when the dream came, the family prepared. It was said that dying in your sleep, while dreaming of the gods, was one of the gentlest departures. The dream world would open, and the soul would pass through softly, as if falling deeper into slumber. Viking burials often mimicked the structure of sleep. The dead were laid on a bed of furs. Their heads were rested on pillows of feathers or moss. In ship burials, the body might lie inside a carved wooden chamber, with bedding, blankets, and even bedposts. Some were buried with dogs or horses at their feet, just as they'd slept in life. Their favorite possessions surrounded them: swords, combs, jewelry, or carved runestones. Women were often buried with keys or weaving tools, children with carved toys, elders with staffs of wisdom. The grave was not a hole, it was a bedchamber for eternity. One of the most iconic Viking traditions was the ship burial. A high-status person might be buried inside a ship, real or symbolic. The ship was seen as a vessel for the soul, a dreamboat to carry them to the next world. The ship was often filled with grave goods and set upon fire, either at sea or in a great pyre on land. Fire cleansed, and just as smoke rose from the hearth each night, so too the flames rose from the burial, carrying the soul into the unknown sky. This was the ultimate sleep, one from which the dream never ended. But not all souls rested peacefully. Some were thought to become draugr, restless dead who walked at night. These were men and women who died with unresolved hatred, greed, or betrayal. To prevent such a fate, families took precautions. Nails were driven through the soles of the feet. The dead might be buried with their heads turned, or with iron scissors placed on their chests. If someone suspected a draugr, they might sleep beside the grave for 3 nights, offering dreams of peace or requesting the spirit's forgiveness. It was said that a soul who died in anger could not find sleep, and so neither could the living. One saga tells of a chieftain who died without settling a land dispute. That night, his widow dreamed of him pacing, unable to rest. The next night he appeared again, this time clutching dirt in his hands. Finally, the villagers gathered at his barrow and held a trial by fire. They burned a torch, spoke his name, and divided the land fairly. Only then did the widow dream of him sleeping, his hands empty, his breath slow. She said she woke with tears, but also with peace. In rare cases, loved ones slept beside the body before burial, not out of grief, but as a ritual of parting, to absorb the final dreams of the dead, to speak a last message, or to allow the spirit to pass gently into the next world. This was considered a profound act of love and strength, a final gift, and in some cases it was believed that the living could receive visions this way. Messages for the clan, warnings, or blessings passed on through the quiet power of shared sleep. Even after burial, the dead returned. In dreams, many Vikings believed their ancestors watched over them, that the dead could appear to offer advice, warn of illness, or bless a new child. Some homes kept small ancestor stones near the hearth. Others placed offerings beside beds, and children were taught to listen closely to dreams where an old face appeared. If your grandmother came to you in sleep, it was never just a dream. It was a visitation, a touch from the past, a sign you were not alone. At last we return to the night. A darker one, a longer one. The longhouse is empty now. The fire has gone cold. But in the silence, a memory lingers. Sleep was never just rest to the Vikings. It was a rehearsal, a sacred rhythm, a connection to something deeper than bone and breath. They believed that if you honored the night in life, with fire, with love, with dreams, you would not fear it in death, that the great sleep was not an ending but a reunion with ancestors, with gods, with everything lost and remembered. And as you close your eyes tonight, may you feel their breath in the wind, their voices in your dreams. They sleep. The fire is everything. In the Viking longhouse, it is the heart that never stops beating. It is light in the darkness, heat in the frost, and spirit in the silence. Without it, there is no food, no life, no ward against the night. Tonight we sit beside that sacred flame. No, we watch it flicker. We listen to it breathe, and we remember the quiet figures who guarded it. Not warriors, not kings, but the watchers, the tenders, the keepers of fire. In the Norse world, the hearth was more than just a cooking place. It was the spiritual center of the home. At the center of the longhouse, the fire was never allowed to go out, especially not in the cold months. It burned through the hours of darkness, a watchful eye that kept the family safe. This fire gave light to the gods, warmth to the ancestors, courage to the children. To sleep beside the hearth was to lie in the arms of protection. But the fire didn't tend itself. The responsibility of tending the fire usually fell to those at the beginning or end of life, the youngest child or the eldest grandparent. This wasn't a punishment, it was an honor. To stay awake by the fire was to keep the house alive. It was a sacred trust. The ember tender, the breath giver, the night's guardian, covered in thick cloaks, these figures would rise quietly while others slept. With a stick, they would stir the coals, add wood gently, watch the flames leap and settle again, and while they worked, they listened to the wind, to the house, to the breath of sleeping kin. It was said you could read stories in the fire. As the wood cracked and hissed, the watchers saw omens in the sparks, shadows in the flames, runes in the twisting smoke. Some whispered to the flame, as if it were a friend. Others recited poems, softly, slowly, to remind the fire of its duty, to stay, to guard, to burn. Children, half asleep, would sometimes wake and watch the flicker, hearing old tales murmured by firelight, of how Thor battled frost giants, or how Odin hung on Yggdrasil for 9 days to earn the runes. and with the rhythm of that voice and the rhythm of the flame, they drifted back to sleep. The Viking night was not safe. Wolves prowled, bandits raided, spirits stirred. But the fire held them back. Its glow marked your home as protected. Its warmth warded off frostbite. Its light revealed the truth behind shadows. A smoldering hearth was also a boundary. Spirits of the dead, those not at peace, were said to pause before crossing the firelight. To cross, it meant invitation, acceptance. That is why many Viking homes were built around the hearth, not beside it. To sleep within its light was to sleep within the house's soul. Some families drew runes in ash before bed. Each night, before sleep, the watcher might take the ash from the edge of the hearth and draw sacred symbols across the doorway. Iwas for defense, Ansus for divine guidance, Raidho for protection on spiritual journeys. Ash itself was believed to hold memory. From the burning of wood, trees that had stood for decades, rose a powder that whispered of old roots, time of seasons turning. Children were taught never to scatter hearth ash carelessly. It was to be used with purpose, with respect. Near the fire always was a weapon, a sax knife, an axe, or even a carved wooden staff. Why? Because should the flame dim and the shadows move, the watcher must be ready, not just for raiders, but for the unseen. Tales were told of homes where the fire went out and spirits entered, where nightmares rose like smoke, where frozen breath marked the presence of something watching. The fire was the first line of defense. But the watcher, the second, and they watched not with fear, but with faith. There's an old tale of a young boy, no older than 7, who tended his family's hearth one winter night. Everyone else was asleep, but he heard a noise soft like weeping. From outside, he didn't move. He simply whispered a line his grandmother taught him. The fire sees you. The fire names you. The weeping stopped. In the morning, his father found prints in the snow, hoof marks, not from a horse, but from something smaller, twisted, and in the ashes of the hearth a perfect circle, as if a spirit had watched from within the flame. The fire had protected them, because the child remembered the words. When a Viking moved homes, married, or left for war, it was customary to take a coal from the family hearth with them, carried in a covered bowl or wrapped in damp moss. This wasn't just practical, it was spiritual. The flame was your lineage, your root. It came from your mother's fire, her mother's before her, all the way back to the dawn. To sleep beside that flame wherever you went was to carry your home with you, and if it ever went out, you rekindled it with ceremony, with silence, with intention. It's said that dreams had different flavors, depending on how close you slept to the fire. Near the embers, dreams were bright, full of color, memory, and strange joy. Further from the hearth, they became shadowed, darker, colder, more foreboding. Some people moved their bedding nightly, depending on what kind of dream they sought. Close, for comfort; far, for prophecy, a curious superstition, but one deeply respected, for in a world ruled by signs, even the direction of your sleep held power. Now the house is quiet again. The fire burns low, its flame a ribbon of orange and gold. The watcher stirs it gently, adds a log, breathes softly. They listen for creaks, for cold wind, for silence, and when the first light of dawn breaks through the cracks, they smile. The night is done. The house has slept safely, and so too may the watcher now close their eyes. Their work is complete. Until tomorrow, sleep now, like the watchers once did, with the fire at your side. Let it burn away your worries. Let its light guard your path, for even in darkness there is warmth, and even in silence someone watches. Night falls gently on the northern hills, mist rises through the heather. The moon glows like polished bone, and in the distance, at the edge of the village, a woman sits by the fire, eyes closed, lips murmuring ancient names. She is not asleep, she is searching, listening. She is a Velva, a Viking dream seer, a weaver of prophecy, a woman who understands that sleep is not silence, but a secret language spoken by the gods. Tonight, we walk in the footsteps of the dream seers, those who read fate through closed eyes, who listened to the night's quiet visions, and found meaning in shadow. In Norse tradition, a Velva was a wise woman, a seeress, a keeper of memory and magic. She was called to interpret signs, foretell events, and walk the invisible paths that linked the living and the unseen. She was not a priestess nor a witch as we imagine today. She was something older. Her power came not from books, but from dreams. From the night, Velvas were respected, feared, even revered. When she entered a home, people fell silent. When she spoke, no one interrupted, for her voice was believed to echo with the power of the gods. And when she slept, she traveled. To the Velva, sleep was not an escape. It was an entrance, a passageway into the other world. She believed that in dreams, the soul could leave the body and walk among spirits, gods, and ancestors. And not just her own. She could walk into your dream, or your child's, or a warrior's troubled rest. This practice was called udiseta, sitting out. It was a kind of trance sleep, performed in sacred places, on burial mounds, at crossroads, or beneath ancient trees. Rumbered in cloaks, surrounded by runes, the vulva would drift into sleep, not to rest, but to listen. And what she heard she carried back. The vulva's visions were rarely direct. She might dream of wolves circling a tree, or of rivers flowing backward, of ships made of feathers, or fire falling from the sky. These were not riddles to confuse. They were symbols, threads in a great tapestry. She interpreted them, wove them into meaning, and spoke them aloud with care. Sometimes her prophecies were beautiful, other times terrifying. But always they were believed. Her dreams could shape marriages, journeys, harvests, even battles. To ignore a Velva's vision was to invite disaster. One tale speaks of Ragna, a Velva who served 3 generations of chieftains. One winter night, the chief's youngest son fell ill, plagued by nightmares. He cried out in his sleep, of drowning, of shadows, of a woman cloaked in flame. Ragna was summoned. She sat by the boy's bed, burned herbs, whispered names of the gods. Then she slept beside him. She dreamed of a burning hall, of the boy older, standing in fire unharmed, of a great wolf watching him from the trees. When she awoke, she smiled. "He will survive this night," she said, "and one day he will save your house from ruin." And so it came to pass. Velvas used various tools to enter dream states. Dirty hot herbs like mugwort and henbane to open the mind. Ot runes, drawn on stones or carved into wood, each carrying unique meaning. Ot songs, known as galdrar, sung softly to guide the spirit into the dream world. Ot stuffs, symbols of authority and connection to the earth. She might drink an infusion, wrap herself in black wool, and chant until her body relaxed, her breath slowed, and her thoughts stretched like thread. And then she would dream, not just for herself but for others. People often called upon a Velva after experiencing troubling dreams. A mother might say, "My daughter dreamed of birds dying in the sky." A farmer, "I saw my fields turn to stone." A warrior, "I walked through fire and felt no pain." The vulva would listen, ask questions, close her eyes. Sometimes she'd slip beside them, other times she'd sleep alone, and return with her interpretation. Each symbol had layers, fertile dots, file dot, fire. Fire could mean transformation or destruction. Water might signal birth, travel, or drowning. Decool animals were omens, some protective, others dangerous, but context was everything. The vulva understood nuance, tone, and the spirit behind the dream. On special nights, solstices, eclipses, or the festival of Dizablot, the vulva might hold a ritual where the entire village stayed silent as she dreamed. These were nights when the veil was thinnest, and even ordinary dreams might echo with God's voices. People placed offerings beneath their beds, bones, herbs, coins, locks of hair. They slept facing the hearth, or with runes on their pillows. And when they woke, they gathered in the longhouse to hear the vulva's vision. These dreams were considered prophecies for the entire clan. To the Norse, fate, or word, was woven like cloth, and dreams were glimpses into that cloth. They didn't always change your destiny, but they helped you understand it, accept it, embrace it. The vulva didn't just tell the future, she helped people meet it with courage. She reminded them, Trind, your dream is not weakness, your fear is not failure. What you see in the night is part of your thread. And that understanding gave people power. The most feared, but most revered, visions were those of death. If a vulva dreamed of a black ship, of a field of bones, or of a raven with 3 eyes, people listened with dread. But her role was not to instill fear, it was to prepare. She would guide families in honoring the coming death, teach them rituals to protect the soul, ensure the right offerings. When sometimes she would even sit vigil at the dying side, dreaming one final time to ease their passage. In this way, she became not just a dream interpreter, but a ferryman of souls. Now, as the fire dims and the wind hushes, imagine the vulva resting beneath the stars, her cloak pulled close, her breath slow, her mind walking the dream path. She dreams not of glory, but of truth, and so can you. Close your eyes and know this. Terindio's sleep is not emptiness, it is full of meaning waiting to be seen. And somewhere, across time and shadow, the dream seers still walk. They whisper in your rest, they guard your fate, they listen, even now, so sleep. And if you dream, remember, close your eyes. Let the wind rock you. The sea is black beneath a sky full of stars. Salt stings your nose. Cold wind brushes your cheeks, and beneath your back, the wooden deck sways with the breath of the waves. This is no bed, and yet, it is where Vikings slept for weeks on end. Tonight, we drift with them across fjords and oceans, into the strange and Spartan world of slumber, upon the open water, where there are no pillows, only shields, no fires, only breath, and where even in sleep, the sea speaks. Viking longships were elegant tools of war and wonder, crafted from oak, their hulls long and low, their sails broad and red-striped, like fire across water. But they were not cruise vessels. There were no private quarters, no cabins, no hammocks or bunks, just wood, salt, and sky. And yet men lived on them for days, weeks, even months, sailing from Norway to Ireland, Iceland, or the far edge of Greenland. And where they lived, they also slept under stars, under storms, under siege. There were no rooms aboard a Viking ship, no shelter, save a tent of animal hide, lashed over the center for the chieftain or navigator. The rest slept where they sat, on deck, amid oars and ropes. Most used their shields as makeshift beds, laid flat to protect from wet planks and rising cold. At night, the men pulled their cloaks tighter. Some curled around their weapons, others used sacks of grain or coiled rope as pillows. If it rained, they pulled wool over their heads and endured. If it snowed, they huddled. They didn't complain. To sleep at sea was a test of will. There's something strange about sleeping at sea. The rhythm of the waves lulls the body, forward, back, like a cradle of the gods. Some Vikings loved this sensation. They claimed to dream more deeply on the sea than anywhere else. Others feared it. They believed that while sleeping at sea, the soul might wander, swept away by the wind, lured into the deep by spirits of drowned men, or creatures older than the gods. To protect against this, sailors often carved protective runes into the rails of the ship. A few even carried charms tied to their wrists, bits of bone or metal, inscribed with spells to keep the soul anchored to the body. Not everyone could sleep at once. Every ship had a night watch, a rotating group of sailors assigned to stay awake, eyes scanning the dark for rocks, enemy ships, or signs from the gods. Some stood by the mast. Others watched the water, listening for changes in the wind. They kept the fire of awareness burning while others slept. These night watchmen saw things the dreamers did not: flickers of light on distant shores, streaks of flame in the sky, whales rising like islands beside the hull. Their silence was part of the ship's balance, their wakefulness sacred. Vikings believed that dreams at sea were not like land dreams. They were closer to the gods. The sea was a borderland between Midgard, the world of men, and Jotunheim, the world of giants. Beneath the waves, ancient things slumbered. Jörmungandr, the world serpent, coiled around the earth. To dream on the sea was to risk hearing them. Some sailors dreamed of drowning, others of swimming with fish that spoke, or riding whales into clouds. If a sailor dreamt of a ship cracking in half, it was considered an omen of betrayal. If they dreamed of a calm sea turning red, they warned the captain. Dreams were taken seriously. They were recorded, interpreted, shared at dawn with salt still clinging to lips. Sleep at sea was not peaceful. Rain would soak cloaks, freeze hands, sting cheeks. The ocean spray never stopped. Even in summer, the nights were cold. In winter, they were cruel. Frostbite claimed toes. Wet bedding caused fevers. A sleeping man too near the edge might roll into the sea and vanish. To guard against this, Vikings invented clever tricks. Zyrand, rope belts tied around their waists and looped to pegs. Trash fur wraps layered inside waxed wool for insulation. Trashed body heat shared among small, and always the low murmur of watchmen keeping count, watching the sleepers, counting the breathing, because sleep could turn to death in an instant. An old tale tells of Skuli the wide-eyed, a sailor who refused to sleep at sea. His crewmates mocked him, called him afraid, but Skuli claimed that each time he slept, he dreamed of a giant whale speaking his name. One night, exhausted, he drifted into slumber. The next morning, the crew awoke to find the ship becalmed, and Skuli gone. No splash, no cry, only a single piece of whaleskin on the deck, carved with runes no one could read. From then on, the crew chanted Skuli's name to the waves every night before sleeping. No, not in mourning, but in respect. But there were peaceful nights too. Nights when the sea was glass and the stars endless. The sail furled, the oars stowed, only the creak of timber and the hush of waves. Sailors lay side by side, sharing stories, then quieting into dreams. Some recited soft poems to the sea, others whispered names of loved ones back home, letting the waves carry those names across the deep. The longship rocked them gently. Sleep came like mist, and in that soft silence, Vikings dreamed of land, of fire, of gods. The Norse believed that the sea did not just cradle the body, it tested the soul. If you could sleep at sea, you were brave, steady, part of the rhythm of the world. If you feared it, the sea would know. Even after death, Warriors hoped to cross the sea of stars to reach Valhalla. The ability to rest amid waves was a sign that your spirit was strong enough for the journey beyond. So sleep sea was a training for battle, for fate, for death, and also for wonder. Now the ship drifts, the sail flutters, a raven caws far and faint. The men are still curled on their shields, wrapped in dreams. Above them, the stars wheel in silence. Below them, something ancient swims, watching, but they are not afraid. They have learned the secrets of sea sleep. They trust the ship, they trust the night, and in the hush between wave and sky, they rest. So too may you, tree-soft creaking wood, gentle waves, one deep exhale. Sleep now as they did. Let the sea rock you. Let your mind drift like a sail on a windless sea. Tomorrow, the storm may come, but tonight the sea is calm. The long night has ended. Outside the longhouse, frost sparkles like powdered silver. Inside, the air is still, thick with the warmth of sleeping bodies, faint trails of smoke, and the fading breath of dreams. And then from the hearth, a glow. A single spark stirs, wood pops softly, someone rises. In the Viking world, sleep was sacred, but so was waking. For the Norse, to wake each day was not just an action. It was a ritual, a rebirth, a chance to thank the gods, cleanse the soul, and begin again. Vikings believed that dreams could linger long after sleep. You didn't just wake up. You crossed a threshold from the world of spirits and ancestors back into the solid world of fire, stone, and blood. The first few moments of waking were filled with meaning. A person would lie still for a breath or two, recalling their dreams, listening to the sounds of the morning, the scrape of iron, the shuffling of animals, the whisper of wind at the beams. Only after this would they rise, careful not to disturb the balance between night and day. Water was a powerful force in Viking belief, cleansing, protective, and spiritually potent. One of the first rituals upon waking was face washing. A small wooden basin, filled the night before, was used to wipe away sleep, physically and symbolically. This was more than hygiene. It was a renewal. Some would dip their fingers in the water and whisper a blessing, and I wash away the dreams of death. I rise into the light of the living. Children were taught this practice early, for it was said that sleep made one vulnerable to spirit, touch, and morning water restored the soul to its rightful home. In many households, the first topic of conversation was not chores or weather, but dreams. A mother might say, "I dreamed of wolves in the garden." A child, "I saw our house float on the sea." A warrior, "I was chasing the moon on horseback." These weren't small talk, they were messages, and often required interpretation. The elders listened carefully. If a dream seemed dark or confusing, they might consult the family's velva, or they might light incense, recite a chant, or make a small offering to Odin or Freyja. A dream not acknowledged could fester. A dream honored could guide the day. The next ritual was always the fire. Even if embers remained, they were stirred gently, carefully. New wood was placed with quiet reverence. The flame was coaxed, not forced. The hearth was more than a heat source. It was the heart of the home. Reuniting it each morning was a way of waking the house itself. Sometimes, families offered a small bit of food to the fire, an egg, a pinch of grain, a splash of milk. This was called Eldar Blot, a simple flame offering, thanking the gods for another night survived. As the fire glowed brighter, the house came alive. Animals stirred in their pens. Dogs padded across the straw. Babies fussed. Children whispered, and all around, people moved in rhythm, quietly, respectfully. Morning was not chaotic. It was structured. Roles were known. Tasks flowed. Dast one person fetched water from the stream, dast another milked the goats. Toddled someone kneaded dough or prepared fish. Toddled children gathered wood or straw, but beneath every action was intention. You were not just rising from sleep. You were rejoining the world. With thanks, some Viking families began their day with spoken verses, soft chants offered to the gods of dawn and strength. One such prayer when Suna rise and light our path, guard our hearts from fear and wrath. Let dream depart and deed begin, and may the day be clear within. These weren't recited loudly. They were personal, quiet, sometimes even whispered while tying boots, braiding hair, or sharpening tools. The goal was balance, to carry the peace of sleep into the action of waking. If someone was preparing for a journey, or worse, for battle, waking was even more ritualized. They might sleep alone the night before, in silence. Upon waking, they would dress slowly, checking each item: boots, belt, blade. Then they'd speak a dedication aloud. Surrandif, I woke in breath, I walk in steel, I fear no fate, I know what's real. Friends or kin would offer a final blessing at the doorway. This was the Viking way of ensuring the spirit was fully present before facing the unknown. Waking was not taken for granted. Sometimes a person woke troubled. A dream had clung to them, a vision too vivid, a shape seen in sleep that felt more real than waking. For this, there were rituals. Ashes from the hearth, rubbed on the forehead to anchor the mind, cold water across the chest to reset the heartbeat, dull smudge smoke from herbs like sage or yarrow to clear spiritual residue. Only then would they eat or speak. Did they feel truly awake? To the Vikings, the soul took time to return to the body after sleep, and that time was sacred. The first food of the day wasn't just nourishment. It was ritual, often simple: porridge, bread, dried meat, or fresh milk. It was shared, not hoarded. To eat alone was rare. Food was a communal bridge, an offering of continuity from night to day. Before eating, some whispered words of thanks, not necessarily religious, but rooted proudent. The fire fed me. The gods kept me. The morning sees me. And with that the day began. The Norse believed the gods watched all, but especially the first act of the day, whether lighting the fire, stretching beneath a tree, or tying the final knot in your braid. Whatever you did first, you did in the sight of Suna, the sun goddess, and Heimdall, the watchman of the worlds. So you moved deliberately. You didn't shout, you didn't curse. You woke gratefully, because waking was a gift, and not everyone woke. Now, as the final coals of this chapter settle, we look toward the light. The Viking world saw sleep and waking as cycles, not enemies, but allies. Night allowed the soul to wander. Day brought it home, and in between, in that hush before the house stirs fully, there was peace. So as you rest now, as this story ends, may your own morning come gently, with intention, with memory, with warmth. You have slept in the longhouse, shared fire with warriors, dreamed with seers, drifted on waves, and now, wake, renewed. Thank you for joining us on this quiet journey into the shadows and stories of the Viking night. From the warmth of the longhouse to the vast silence of the sea, you've traveled with us through dreams, fears, and the strange sleep rituals of a people long gone, but never forgotten. If this story helped you rest, if you felt the ancient fire flickering just a little brighter, please consider liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and leaving a comment below. Your voice helps us continue telling stories that bring peace, mystery, and wonder to the end of your day. Until next time, sleep deeply, dream boldly, and let history hold you. Good night, dear listener.